Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Conversation with Carl. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe for the most up-to-date content. Today, we are excited to speak with Mital Sar-Zhitensky, a professor of information risk operations management at the University of Texas at Austin McCombs School of Business. She has initiated and led University of Texas's Transitional AI Initiative and serves as an academic board member for the university's Machine Learning Lab. Welcome, Professor Mital Sar-Zhitensky, to the conversation.
Thanks, Carl. Happy to be here.
So I always like to begin when I talk about this. What is AI? Because everyone has a different definition.
So AI, it's as a field of research, already started many decades ago, right? Had set up the goal of trying to create the sort of intelligence we see in nature through artificial means. So as a field, this was kind of the very, very ambitious goal. In practice, what we were able to achieve is that we have computational methods, basically, methods that that use computing and data. So these are data-driven methods that find patterns in data. Literally, they find patterns in data and they use these patterns to either anticipate or estimate things that are unknown, like for doing prediction, like predicting what sort of music you like, and that's used, let's say, quite a bit in retail. So the predictive AI sort of do these sort of things, trading stocks, in order to trade stock, you needed to anticipate sort of uncertain outcomes, right? What happens if I do this or do that, right? So this is kind of a very, very powerful engine in dealing with risky contexts, right, when the outcomes are uncertain. But also, and that's the most recent kind of development that really sort of was very in the face of kind of the general public, is the ability to generate content that is similar to the content that the AI was trained on. So again, this is pattern learning, right? So basically capturing the patterns in the data and then replicating it, right? So
We're online and I am doom scrolling, as I like to say. It's everything that they think I would like to see.
Yes. So exactly. So the engines behind the recommender systems the algorithms in that underlying to YouTube and social media, also the content that you get exposed to, the ads that you receive online are basically based on these patterns. And they say, Carl, sort of, let's say online behavior is very similar to, other people's behaviors, right? So these are aggregated patterns that help predict or anticipate. It's not always perfect. These are imperfect algorithms. This is the other thing we need to kind of keep in mind,
But
that anticipate your preference. So this is what we generally refer to as predictive AI. And then, the generative AI use patterns that learn in data in order to generate similar content, like generate text or generate images and videos that are based on the patterns of how videos and images look like, the data that they were trained on, the images and videos and text that these models were trained on.
the videos are becoming very scary now because they look real.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference because you're talking about video?
I think that's a field of research in and of itself, right? So
okay.
I'm sure that mitigation will arise. Watermark is another path to pursue this, basically that the generator itself, the algorithms that generate the content would leave a mark sort of to notify this was AI generated, right?
Yeah.
So that is, this is something that definitely became clear that it's needed in some, right? Especially given the adversarial potential to kind of really.
So if I talk to people today, if I would go walk on the street right now and I asked them, what is AI? They would say it's ChatGPT.
Right. Right. Or they say
Yes.
this is the real AI or whatever,
Yeah.
another is AI. Yeah.
And
So
that's not AI. I mean, AI is
it's part of it. I mean,
it's part of it. Yes.
it's a very powerful progress that was made, and it's already quite impactful, and we're really just scratching the surface of the potential. But, like any other powerful technology, it has an enormous positive potential, all the way from drug development to making other things more efficient so that we can make services more accessible, cheaper, from education to healthcare, right? So the positive potential is enormous. But as you pointed out, so are the risks, right? So the making, especially given that these type of AI algorithms in our application are far more accessible than other powerful technologies that some nations could keep sort of, or mitigate or limit the access of, let's say, adversaries. This one is going to be much easier to replicate and use by people who want to do harm as well. So I think
Well,
that's a real
yes,
societal
that's,
issue. This is a
yeah.
real, yeah.
And then how do we stop people from using it to doing harm?
Yeah, I wish I had a quick
Yeah,
answer
yeah, I wish I had the answer. Yeah.
for this, but I can tell you that I think academia is a great place to focus on this. But we need kind of to really create a collaborative platform for academics, policymakers, industries that they really want. And I think it would, if that's not going to, if we're not going to find the right platforms or the right frameworks rather to do this, everybody's going to suffer from this. So I
Yeah.
think industries are not as engaged with this, but I think that that's something that everybody has to contribute to that. But I think that, technology is not going to be able to solve it on its own. It's something that requires policies as well.
Yeah, I would imagine that Congress would have to get involved and laws would have to be created to protect us
Yes.
because it could be used to do really bad things as well, as you said.
Yeah.
So how does AI play into medicine? Let's talk about that because medicine is there's big changes in medicine now because of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the potential is enormous. We should keep in mind that medicine and healthcare, in general, is a very high stake domain that is fairly conservative in adopting technologies, especially sort of AI related technologies. I should note that, the predictive AI that I mentioned earlier existed for several decades at the level that it can exceed sort of human decision making. Let's say predictive AI that can be very useful in improving diagnostics, improving treatments, etc. It hasn't been extensively integrated in healthcare. So forget about, generative AI that's more recent, but predictive AI, which is actually safer to integrate. It's the prediction and the accuracy of these predictions are fairly robust. So in that sense, it's a safer technology to be integrated into practice. It's been a very, very slow process, which, for good reasons as well. It's a high stake domains, but there are other forces at play. But the potential, I think, is huge. I don't know, in a way, I don't know where to start. We know that human decision makers are imperfect in many ways. I mean, even our ability to stay consistently fresh, and focused throughout the day, a work day, right? This is
Yes.
something that machines don't suffer from. I mean, I'll start with the very rudimentary thing. The research that shows how anywhere from judges to physicians, as they get tired, hungry, etc., their decision making is undermined by this. If you had a machine partner that advises you or that notifies you that, hey, do you want to rethink that decision or consider an alternative diagnostic or course of treatment, that can make a huge improvement in practice.
But isn't that
Obviously,
kind of scary? Because that's my fear. Like, because when I go to my doctor now he says to me, I use AI, and he puts his phone down and he said, AI is going to record this conversation for us.
the
So,
transcription, yeah.
yeah, so now it's all transcribed. But what happens if it doesn't understand me? What happens if it gets the wrong
It does
thing?
happen.
Yes.
It does happen. I think this is, you bring a good point, which is we need to assess, and every technological, change, we need to assess what trade-off it introduces, right? Because every technology will have a trade-off. So the transcription is not going to be imperfect, but we have to compare this or the benefit of that with what did we have before that, or what was possible, right? So before that, the doctor was engaged in actually typing maybe only the most important thing that you said, probably dropped some things that they didn't get in the course of the conversation that they misheard or that missed because they were busy in typing, right? So I don't think there are a lot of studies to show this, but I would assume that, and it's good to have those studies, but I would assume that it's probably better. It's imperfect, but it is probably a lot better, a lot more comprehensive. It really gets everything that was said, and it frees up the doctor's, cognitive load. Humans have bounded cognitive
Yes.
abilities. Doctors, the fact that they're doctors, any specialists, judges, they are as bounded as you and I. They're clever, but they're not perfect. And they can't really pay as much attention to thinking about what you're saying and typing it at the same time. So that frees up sort of their cognitive load onto really what matters. And those imperfections are probably, in this case of
So
the description, is a good trade-off.
so what happens if AI and the doctor disagree on my diagnosis?
That's, I think, is one of the more interesting things. We don't have a lot of studies on this, but we do have some, and this is something that actually myself and my students have looked into quite carefully. What we're seeing, which is different in high stake contexts, we're really seeing very different things because it's very consequential. One thing that, there are many things that could happen, but certainly it creates a load on the decision maker, right? So sometimes it increases stress and some anxiety. The AI disagrees
Yeah.
with me, and we don't always get good outcome out of it. So it is possible, and that has already been documented in research, that it is possible for high stake decision makers that are very well trained and very experienced to either begin to over rely on the AI, because these disagreements is the most important, the most consequential tensions that exist. When they agree, the outcome's not going to change, but the outcome
Yes.
has potential to change when they disagree. What we don't want is we don't want to see sort of almost like blind over reliance, and humans have a tendency to overload cognitive effort on something else if it's possible. And and physicians and clinicians are humans, so that is one possibility. And we see that it does happen. It doesn't happen with everybody, and it doesn't happen on all cases that people deal with, but in a subset, let's say, of the cases that a physician deals with, we could see sort of over reliance, for example, complicated cases, etc. But on the other end of that spectrum, we also see physicians sort of rejecting good advice, sort of overriding the AI that could have actually improved their decision and correct like a bad decision or like an incorrect decision, right? So the challenge here, which the technology itself doesn't have a perfect solution for, but we need both
But
technology.
I find that medicine there are many answers to one problem, and you are sometimes left with decisions that you have to make that are
As a
very
patient,
scary
maybe?
as a patient, that are like, well, I don't know, I'm not the expert. And if you have AI and the doctor telling you different things,
No, you
I mean,
raise a
yeah,
great point. It's more like I think the practice in the
yeah,
US, where a lot of the, let's say there was yeah, so that in many areas of medicine, there are alternative course of treatments, and there's not enough evidence to suggest that for you, Carl, that is the optimal path. And in this case, the physicians sometimes would ask you, what do you want to do? And you have the agency to decide, but you're like, I don't really know. I don't have the
I,
evidence and the data to decide, right? So I think this is kind of almost like a separate issue. Even without the
yes,
AI, the AI is not going to make
yeah.
that situation any better. But I think that's that's something that potentially the AI could provide maybe more factual, sort of more evidence to support those decisions better, because there are a lot of uncertainties, right? And projecting what would have happened if you pursue that path or that path. Right now, we don't have a lot of data that's tailored for us, for you, your physiology, your medical
Yeah.
history, etc. And that's something that AI could help with, not make your that decision on behalf of the clinician or the physician or yourself, would help provide the data that can support a decision.
Let's talk about education. As a professor, how are you seeing it? Because everyone says it's taking away the thought process from students, or a lot
Yeah.
of people say that.
No, I think that's a real concern. I mean, on one hand, let's say when the calculator was presented, right? Maybe people had similar concerns. People wouldn't know how to do 5 + 5, and yeah, and we rely more on calculators and calculating things, right? Even in the restaurant, we have like the pre-calculated 12% tip, 15% tip, etc. Right? We don't want to burden ourselves with that. I think what we don't there. I think we need to be thoughtful, right, and decide what skills, what ability, and mostly focusing on, I would say, on critical thinking. And critical thinking relies on some more fundamental understanding and knowledge that we need to build for people to be able to be critical thinkers. And in every field, we need to sort of pick and choose what we can sort of delegate and maybe not focus on that too much, and what things we really need to strengthen in kids and also in college students, what tasks that college students involved in. I think that's a real concern. I think that, people offload more cognitive tasks on AI. And we're seeing this already, on generative AI, solving homework problems and personal problems and other things, and design the education system based on that. I think deciding which basic skills we want to retain. I mean, in elementary school, we still teach kids to do 5+5, even though we have calculators, right?
But
So
it's a tool to help you. And
it's a
AI
tool, but
should
we
be,
still teach
yeah,
them not to use. We teach them how to do ++5 and multiplication
yeah,
without the tools, right? So that was
yes,
a decision.
yeah,
I'm not an expert on why this decision was made, but it seems to me that's fairly fundamental to allow people to be independent decision makers, right? At some point. And so I think we need to decide what are the basic skills that, we have machinery to do that, but that we still want people to be able to do that. And above that, to strengthen critical thinking, to be inquisitive, to question evidence that's presented to you, etc. That I think is not something that's emphasized as
yeah.
much.
A lot of people say that AI is going to take my job away.
Yes.
Do you see that as something that's going to happen? If you're going back years ago, you could look back at the horse and buggy, and people said, we don't want the car. It's going to take the horse and buggies away. But we ended up surviving.
Yeah. And I think actually people now use that example as, yes, your job will be taken away, as if the person with the job is the horse with the job, right?
Yeah.
So the horse's job was taken away, kind of thing. But I think that, I'm not an economist, so a disclaimer, of course, that's not my expertise. But I think that thinking in first principles, even understanding that technology is helpful to be a little bit more balanced in that perspective. So I think there are definitely some jobs that are very repetitive, low stakes sort of, type of jobs, like, answering calls in a call center or technical support that, the people who do it keep repeating sort of, a lot of guidelines, etc. So I think some of these are going to be really transformed or completely eliminated. I think that's possible, but I think most white collar jobs, which I think most of the debates sort of focus on that, will change, but are not going to disappear. And I think there are going to be more new jobs as well, that a lot of these, white collar jobs, have transferable skills to transfer into these new jobs that are necessary in an AI-based sort of task or jobs. So I think that, human judgment, and that's why I think critical thinking matters, is still going to be valued and paid for, and maybe even more so than before. AI is not only imperfect, but it's also, in some ways, it's superhuman. Like, for example, in predictive AI, it can achieve much more. We're not very good at predicting or estimating things. What's the likelihood Carl will buy a Tesla over the next year, right? I'm not good at it, but an AI would be very good at this. But on the other hand, they're lacking, they don't have a lot of human abilities to perceive the broader picture, if you will, of situations, right? To bring understanding from one domain to another context. They are very narrowly, what a different types of AI able to do is fairly narrow or limited by what the AI was trained to do and the
Yeah.
way it's trained. And that imposed a lot of limitation on, its ability to apply what we generally refer to as kind of common sense or broader understanding of a context that, AI is unable to do. And people would say, well, but maybe it's just a phase and it will be. Maybe. I don't think we have the frameworks to do that
It
right now.
wasn't like if you were talking about the blizzard in New York that
Yeah.
we're having now. Last week, they weren't sure we're getting it, and it seems like it just snuck up on us. So
Hmm.
AI could not tell me. AI could have told me we might have 2 storms this year,
Yeah.
or we would have, but it wouldn't have been able to tell me when they were coming.
Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, it can estimate maybe somewhat well the probability of this happening, but maybe not even that, right? So there's
Yeah.
certainly some phenomena in nature like precipitation that is just harder to predict.
Yeah.
AI is not a magician. It's not know-it-all. It's really data driven, and if we don't really have the right data or the right understanding of how to map that to certain outcomes, the AI is not going to
Yeah.
change that reality.
And then social media, there's a lot of AI on that,
Yes.
and people are afraid of that, I think. What's your advice to people who are using AI on social media?
So what specifically do you mean? Do you mean the content that we're getting is driven by this, or people generate
Content,
content with AI?
the content that we're getting is generated by AI, so sometimes I don't know if it's real.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
then,
And it's
and as
increasing. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this is a real concern, beyond the mundane thing of like, I've wasted my time or I read some, news item that is fake. I mean, I'm seeing people posting on Facebook about some news items that actually are all fake, and it's kind of embarrassing after the fact. Oh, it was fake, and it was a waste of many people's time. But I think that this, social media platforms should be more motivated to be responsible for the content that's been generated and people are exposed to, and I think that there should be kind of a economic incentive
yeah,
to do that, right? Because it definitely generates engagement, because fake content can be a lot more, outrageous than real content, right? And therefore more engaging. And it can be, and of course, we also know about the adversarial use of like turning people against each other and all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's the real, in my view, that's the real risk,
yeah.
right? Of really societal disruptions and undermining the well-being of individuals and societies, from bullying, mostly young adults, or teenagers that are, or children, most vulnerable to these, to fake news that can undermine markets, can undermine societal well-being. So these are, I think that the platform should be responsible for that, and I think that we can have, if there is a will, there'll be a way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where are we 5 years from now in AI?
Oh gosh, don't ask me. um
As AI is a predictor, you can predict it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that on the positive side, I think that the breakthroughs that we've observed, in fact, opened the door to also, I mean, because I think that that breakthrough, and actually the fact that you said before, the fact that, almost everyone, regardless of their understanding of AI, was exposed to what AI can do, at least, or some kinds of AI. I think it opened the door for catalyze kind of the positive impact that AI can have in business, in society overall. There's a lot more openness than there was before, and I think that's a good thing. I think AI has a lot of value, can bring a lot of value, and I think that openness is important. I am a little bit worried about the hype that is being obviously magnified by those who have interest in kind of creating that hype and the valuation of their companies, etc. Because the gap between what actually can happen in some areas, it is really incredible, etc. In others, less so. So I think that the hype can lead to a reversal of attitudes, and I've always, of the last 3 years since 2022, I've been worried about this, that the disappointment, once some failures will occur, and they will at some point, or maybe even gradually, there'll be a realization AI has these limitations. So I am worried a little bit about overreacting to the hype, and
Yeah.
then overreacting to the limitations. So I think that I'm a little bit concerned about business folks trying to kind of create, or helping to create, that hype, and also the fears about white collar jobs and all that panic. I am worried about that.
But everything's always changing. The world
Yes.
keeps changing, so it doesn't keep staying the same. So
No, that's, yeah, that is
yeah,
true.
that's the one constant, is that there will be change.
That's true. But
Yeah.
I think we've only scratched the surface on the beneficial application that can be built on AI. I think we need to be a little bit faster, like as far as policymakers, etc., a bit faster on some regulation and some mitigation. The other thing that, on the flip side of the good potential, one thing that we are or at least already seeing, is that there are definitely a lot of opportunities to bring AI to bear to create efficiencies that might be good for business, but not necessarily for society. Even in medicine, I would predict that it's definitely possible. And there's always a trade-off. So for example, you make some services cheaper, faster, right? So you can
Yeah.
reduce kind of the wait for these services, et cetera. You can increase accessibility. On the other hand, probably the quality, I know that the quality can improve, but it might also get worse in some cases. And I don't think a lot of people will have the motivation to actually conduct these studies and report the before and after in terms of quality.
Yeah.
As long as efficiencies could be created and more money can be made, I think these services will be integrated, potentially at the cost of quality of services. And what I worry about is the lack of transparency, right? That let's say if you have a choice to choose this service versus that service, or people generally would not be aware of the change in quality
Yeah.
that they're receiving. And there could be ways to integrate AI to maintain quality or improve quality with efficiency as well.
Sure.
But again, that requires additional investment if the incentives are not there, the
Yeah.
economic incentives are not there. Because, for example, you as a consumer who pays for the service don't know the difference in quality you're getting. So I worry about those sort of
Yeah.
outcomes.
And as we wrap up, is there anything that I forgot to ask you that we should have discussed that we should need to talk about?
I think people can be a little bit, need to be a little bit less anxious. I think that it's useful for the general public to be aware that a lot of the, headlines that the industry is generating, et cetera, is self-interest. There's self-interest in that, and they should maybe attune more to what academics are saying about this, et cetera, and, not worry too much.
So, Mital Sachensky, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you out there for listening to me. As always, let me know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, everyone, be safe.